Happy Friday, beautiful people, and welcome to your first sip of the weekend.
You're tuned into your happy hour with Friday Feels. We're celebrating all you working professionals out there doing your crazy craft, embracing the beauty of being human and connecting authentically. We are host Sarge and Nicole. We're living and working around the world and we're holding space for you, keeping it raw and real as we share fresh content with you every week. So follow us on LinkedIn at Friday Feels and Instagram at These Friday Feels for updates throughout the week.
In our last episode, we spoke about the top 10 personal questions, which was so much fun. And this week, we're joined by our Friday Feels interns, Lilah and Ashley. So awesome to have you guys on this week. For those who are starting on their professional journey, we're continuing the theme of top 10s, and we're going to be chatting about the top 10 on being young, wild, and working this summer. So all the questions that young professionals have for their new summer internships, we're going to be answering. So let's dive in.
So very, very welcome to the podcast. Firstly, we are so happy to have you guys part of the team. It's made such a huge difference in the back end and running things smoothly. And it's so great to see Instagram actually having a bit more of a presence and all of that. So yeah, I welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Maybe you guys can give us a quick intro of you and your favorite Friday Feels moments so far this last week.
Yeah, I can start. I'm Ashley. I'm the social media intern, and thank you so much for having us on here. I'm from Arizona, and I'm a student right now studying communications and entrepreneurship. And my favorite Friday Feels moment was probably in a couple weeks ago episodes when Nicole was talking about her favorite kinds of eggs. I really like that.
I'm Lilah. I'm also a student. I'm from California, and I'm studying econ and data science. And I'm also the business development intern. I think one of my favorite Friday Feels moments was probably when we were shopping for workaways online and just getting to know what that was. So
amazing. Oh, thanks, guys. Yeah, it's so great to have you. And so you guys have some questions for us. We haven't really thought about these. Just like last week, we're keeping it very surprise-filled this month, all about top 10. So yeah, shoot, let's see how much we can answer or what we'd like to share. And we'll plead the fifth otherwise. So.
Yeah, sure. So I guess our first question was what should you wear to the office?
So I think it depends on your industry and also where you are in the world. So I remember when I was working in New York, I would always wear, we were kind of trained in school because I went to a business school. They were very particular about how you present yourself, how your resume is, make sure you send a please and thank you, and always dress professionally. And so when I made a transition from finance into startup world, it was very noticeable. I would wear, even if I tried to dress down, I just wasn't really doing it effectively because everybody was wearing this combination of sweaters and jeans and old man shoes, I want to say. And I liked it because it was more flexible for me. Some days I could show up in a hoodie, but always when I had client meetings, I would try to have at least a blazer and some sort of shirt that wasn't a t-shirt on. I think it's a really interesting trend that's changed. I think they had a recent article where it was kind of Mark Zuckerberg used to wear t-shirts for everything for quite a long time. And all of a sudden now he's a fashionista and he definitely has a stylist. And there was an article and it was when did tech in Silicon Valley become cool? Bezos is now wearing designer things. So I think you just kind of have to take the temperature of where you're at. It's not a wrong question to ask, your peers or your managers depending on, some people have a website and you can kind of see in their pictures what they choose to wear in the About Us. I think that's a really good indicator. So we don't have you dressing down when you should be dressing up. And I had to get rid of a lot of my Brooks Brothers stuff because I just had no use for it and I looked like an oddball in the office.
Yeah, I think also I walked kind of a stint in corporate. I mentioned this last week, I think, and yeah, that was obviously very much like audit firm, you know, and you're in high heels and all the women look beautiful and pencil skirts and everything. That was great. The interesting thing was, you know, as I'm sitting like this and I can see the video, I can see the tattoo on my wrist, but I did not feel comfortable to have that open or even have it when I was working there. And I think times have changed a little. But the moment I moved into fintech and what you were saying, Saj, like fintech's got like a really cool vibe. You know, you can wear your really anything you want. I felt quite comfortable to get a tattoo and show it quite openly. For me, it's kind of like a part of your expression and your art is what you wear. So I think it just depends on the environment you're in. If you're in a creative agency working with artist managers, no worries. We are crop top and, you know, jeans and slacks or whatever. But if you're in a corporate environment, obviously dress the part and you can take some cues from the people around you. But just be yourself, be authentic, you know. If you want to dress colorful, do so. So, yeah.
Great. And then our next question, how much personal info at work is too much personal info?
So I'm a big proponent of less is more with the personal info. But I think that's just from being in super corporate environments for a while. I mean, I think it's cool to know about people's personal lives, but I think it treads the line of like, you don't want to trauma dump at work. I think that's where it becomes like, oh, you know, my sister did this and it was so crazy and I got locked out of the house, and it's like a whole derailment of why you're there. I think that is where it becomes. But again, it's something that you kind of have to feel out with your coworkers. I would say though, you know, something that I always tell young professionals is just kind of tread on the side of caution there, you know, with sharing a lot of your business to your coworkers, because you never know if it might hurt you for a promotion or for staying on or saying something that, you know, goes around the office as like office gossip, which happens in every office, especially with who your friends are. So I would say definitely make friends, be friendly, you know, choose to share parts of your personal life that you wouldn't mind if their grandmother heard. I think that's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, I can kind of echo what you're saying, Saj. And I've always kept things very separate. You know, even if I've gone through a lot of personal challenges, I've never really spoken about those things at work, even though people can see you're going through a tough time. You know, I don't think it's clever to voice those things. But I also want to say be human. You know, I think part of the amazing teams that I've been part of in my journey, what made them so incredible is that they felt a bit like family. And that only happens when you do open up your heart, you know. And not to say you must trauma dump your shit on people, but it's more actually just being yourself, which means laugh from your heart, you know, laugh from the belly, share your life. But yeah, just I guess there's a line, there's a fine line. So you'll feel out what that is.
Yeah. Given that like summer internships can be such a short amount of time, how do you like recommend that we kind of make the most of it?
It's a good question. I think just ask a bunch of questions. I think ask as many questions as you can. And really, probably by digging into the things that you want to learn about in your own time and then bringing that to the table, that will help uncover more learning and for everybody involved. But there's a lot that, you know, I guess we're also discovering this now. There's a lot that we know, but we don't always know to share it if the opportunity doesn't present itself. I would just say use all the moments to gain that experience and also share that. By sharing, you learn something new about the other person too. It's about personal relationship learning as well.
I would say I think it's important to also understand your manager's management style. I think that's a really important question that's gotten me really far, is just asking them like, hey, what's your management style? Do you prefer how do you prefer I prioritize these things? Do you prefer I kind of go off and do this work, or do you want to see it while I'm working on it? I think that's really helpful because some people are visual learners. Some people, especially when you're first starting out, they're not really sure of kind of your abilities. And so you might be a really strong candidate in terms of the interviewing process, but when it comes to actually adapting that to the work, sometimes it's hard for them to see, like, have they used these tools before? Are they confused about something? I'm the type of person, unless I fully understand it, like I might look at it, I'll come back, I'll look at it again. And some people just want you to execute. They're not, interested kind of so much in the process because they're more interested on the execution. And so I think just really understanding your manager, there's a popular belief that people don't quit jobs, they quit managers. And so it's very important that you understand like how to work with your manager in a way that feels good for you and for them. And just voicing that, I've had managers in the past where we spend 2 hours on a call that was supposed to be 1 hour and there's 50 things on the to-do list. And actually at the end of that, I'm exhausted and I have no idea where to start. And so when I do it now, I'm really mindful of just telling the people that I work with, hey, you tell me what you got out of the action items. And it does get easier over time. So I would say if you're starting out, that's a question that sometimes you don't want to ask because you don't want to like fail at it, but it will help you get you very far in terms of even at the end of it, making sure that your manager is pleased with your work because you're not waiting for a 3-month review for you to check in and see what you did, right or wrong. It's never too early to do that.
Yeah. Just to quickly add on there, I think, like you said, an internship is really short. So you're very much in charge of your career and your path. And so I think speaking up and saying, hey, this is what I want to learn. Can you help me with this? Otherwise, we don't know. So and if it's a great internship experience, people will make sure that they can help you with that, in some way, even if it's referring you to someone. So, but yeah, we've definitely seen guests come on in the podcast, and as much as an internship is, you're still learning, a lot of people who start jobs, entrepreneurship, it's very much the same kind of thing. You're also still learning. And so they always talk about the fact that they spoke to people about what they were doing, what they're wanting to learn. And yeah, the more you kind of speak that out there, then the more people can support you.
Great. That's great advice to hear, especially since me and Lilah are like in our internship experience right now.
Yeah, tell us what you need.
Great. And then our next question is, how should I act on company offsites like conferences or social events at work, and how friendly is too friendly?
So I've seen this go completely haywire. And I think this is a really good question because people don't like to tell other people this, but like you should not be acting crazy at your conferences or your work parties or your Christmas parties. I think, when we were talking about this topic earlier in the week, we had, I was working for a startup and we had a Christmas party. And this guy who's super quiet just started going crazy on the dance floor after like pounding drinks, like pulling people on, like doing EDM moves. And it was like, I mean, I'm still shocked and it's been years. So like, it's just, I mean, he didn't really do anything that wrong, but I've just seen where this has been here. Like I've seen people get fired after Christmas parties because they were being unprofessional in the sense like, oh, I'm going to walk you home. And then like they drank too much and they're angry. Like it can just go haywire. So I would say like, if you feel like there's a sense where things are getting kind of out of hand, I've seen people leave earlier than they should because they can see where things are going. And that's just kind of how I've operated in my career. And it's kind of saved me from a lot of things like, oh, did you hear what happened? No, sorry, I wasn't there. I left early. I think, it's always good to have a good time, but that's also why you have friends, that you can kind of go out and have fun with. And again, I would say just make it in a way where people can't go back and say, oh, did you see what Ashley and Lilah did at XYZ? If they can, then like, you have a problem, even if it's not a problem for you right now. It could be later on. And there's been so many times where For example, when I worked at Bitly, a lot of the hires actually came from the ladders, which was my first internship. And some of them I didn't even know. We were there at the same time. And so people do tend to like travel in packs if you plan on staying on an industry. They know a lot about each other. I used to go to my friends who was in finance, and those were even worse. Like these people just they would just go buck wild like at their I used to go to my happy hour to start up and then go to a finance happy hour after. And it was just like it was like two different worlds. So I would say now the thing is like company offsites and conferences is where people get to let loose. I think it's good to socialize and build that camaraderie. But always like keep in mind that, you know, you want to have a long career in a field. Keep that in mind that your reputation precedes you, and a lot of referrals go based on personal networks. So if you wouldn't want it repeated somewhere, I wouldn't really do it.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I'm thinking back to all the socials over the different time. You know, I think it's what you said earlier, Saj. Take the temperature of where you're at. You know, I think WeWork, the archived WeWork, will probably disagree with you. You know, they were like, have fun, do what you want. So that didn't turn out too well for them. But I think just being yourself, you know, I think it's also a really cool opportunity to show a different side of yourself. Because sometimes in a work context, you know, maybe if there's a dance floor and I'm speaking from personal experience, there's a DJ booth and you gravitate towards there and you kind of show a different side of yourself that you wouldn't really show at work. That's fun, you know, and then people can really relate to you in a different way. But I think, yeah, keep it professional, you know. That's alcohol is an interesting drug. I think, and I use that word in that way because I think if it's used in a social way, that's fun, you know, in that professional context, it's really great to share. But yeah, it really can expose parts of yourself that you have maybe not quite figured out yourself yet. So rather do that on a different occasion, I think. But yeah, just have fun too. I mean, that's what it's there for. And, a lot of the time you spend so much time with people at work, you know, that becomes like family. That becomes some of the best friends. For me, it's still some of the best friends I have are the friends I met at work. So yeah, I think it's a balance, everything in moderation.
That completely makes sense. This kind of goes along with that, but what are your thoughts on in-office romances? Yay or nay?
Who came up with this question? Oh,
I think it depends again on your company size, where you are, and what's going on. I've seen them go really well. I've seen them go really well, and then I've seen them go really not well. But sometimes it does happen a lot because you feel closer to people. You get to see them in different lights. And that's what I really like about the startup scene. I mean, I'm always talking about it, but it's that you kind of like blend what you really want to do, your strengths, and then also, you know, that informality that brings people together. And sometimes, like, I've known people who've gotten married, they were in different departments, or they got together after one of them left the job. So I would say, yeah, you just kind of err on the side of caution there, you know, understand what the policies are at your job, and you know, try as much as you can not to put yourself in a position where if something did shed the light of day, that it wouldn't reflect negatively on you. And if you know ahead of time that you meet someone and you do like them, you want to pursue it, whether it's like casually or not, you might want to consider like one of you, you know, moving your job just so you don't have that conflict of interest and people don't have it as something that kind of informs how you move around at the job. Like, oh, you know, she's preferred for a promotion because her boyfriend is on this team and his manager said XYZ. Things like that. I mean, things get around, especially when you're in a close, tight-knit community. People talk. And there's been many instances where there actually were in-office romances where people were specific about not saying anything because they were scared. So I think you just kind of have to understand what your corporate policies are like, and also always make sure that you're doing your job. I think, you know, a lot of things you can do your job well, but you also have to be mindful of playing by the rules of your organization.
Yeah.
Anything that you have to say, Nicole?
I agree. I agree. Yeah, I laugh because I've been on interesting sides of this coin of of having relationships with people at work. And I feel like if you can, it's better to have a relationship with someone that doesn't work in the same company as you, because one, you get to go home and actually share a different kind of space together. I think that's really nice. But if you do, that's also cool because you understand each other's space. So in some way, I think, like you said, you might meet the love of your life there. Be open to that. I'm not one to stand in the path of of romance, but I think just be careful about the one day you're in love and the next thing you are in a conflict, and then you still have to walk past each other in the office, or third party situations happen and you still have to walk past those people and stand in the elevator with them, and so it gets tricky, and that's where the office parties also, like you say, get interesting. So I think follow your heart, but yeah, just keep it professional is all I can say. So
Okay. And then our next question, tell us about your worst job experience or worst interview experience.
I haven't had a bad job experience, really. Worst interview experience. This is a weird one. I remember when I was working in corporate at KPMG, I joined on as a financial crime investigator in an internship, actually. It was a bit like an audit for 3 years, but in forensic. And by the end of it, they wanted to interview us to become permanent employees of the company, and it was just terrible. It was really this horrible experience of, like, you've been proving yourself for 3 years already, working at a certain level, and then you have to go through rounds of interviews and kind of try to explain why you have value. So for me, that was a terrible interview experience, of one that I didn't even really want to go through. Yeah, it was quite a random one. So yeah, that was mine. What about you, Saj?
I guess I'll speak on my worst interview experience because I guess I'd just rather do that. I've had mostly good job experiences, but the worst interview experience I had was I used to work in the city, and I would just apply to all these different things because I wasn't sure what I was, wanted to really do. I knew the job that I found wasn't really what I liked, and so I interviewed at a consulting company. It was an IT consulting company. They did like IT solutions for different clients, very big company. And back then they had something called stress interviews. And I'm not sure if I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but it was an interesting role because it was global. I was really young. I was probably like 1 year out of school. It was global and it was super exciting. And they made you go through like, I think it was like 6 rounds in one day. And each round had more than one person. So some of them had like 5 people in them. Some of them had like 3. And there used to be this thing in finance, which is called stress interviews. And they literally try to throw you off to see how you respond in stressful situations, which was horrible. It was really bad. Even though, like I said, like we received like a lot of training from NYU and their business school. They had a lot of clubs that would talk to you about this. They tell you, they tried to prep you, but it's just different when you actually have to go through it and you don't know the people on the other side. And they had this guy, he had traveled all over the world with like international clients and just really impressive career. And he was such a hard ass. Like, oh my God, this guy was like, I almost cried. And that was like, I forgot, like they asked us something like, oh, what would you do? Tell me how you would solve this problem. And so I started like going through how I would solve it. They leave you in a room for like 20 minutes while you sit there and try to solve it. Like, how many balls are in like New York or something. And you go through this exercise, and I forgot what the question exactly was. It wasn't that. It was something a little bit more tailored to the job about working internationally between China and New York, and what would you do if the client like doesn't like the work that you have or something like that. So I started going through my thought process, and the guy straight up asked me, he was like, oh, why would you say something like that about like, Chinese culture? Are you racist? And I was like, what? No, like I didn't say anything in my answer that pointed to racism. So it was, but they do those things. And like I guess while it was happening, I didn't know, like I had known these existed, but I hadn't gone through one. So I just thought the guy was just being rude. So I was very much like trying to decide if I want my real personality to show or if I want like my professional one. And I was like, well, I have to be professional. It's still an interview. And so the guy like went on, and I was like, no, I'm sorry that you misheard what I said. That's really not what I intended. Maybe I should clarify, this is what I meant about the culture. I've taken some classes there. I visited Hong Kong. This is what I see in the corporate culture, and I really admire XYZ. And the guy was like, oh, because, my wife is, Asian. And I was like, that's awesome. I really, I think there's so many things to admire, and just kept going. And I remember going through, and when I was coming home, I was like, what just happened to me? Like, this was just so insane. Like, that wasn't the only interview. He was in other ones afterwards. And you just have to keep going to these interviews after these people are telling you these things. And the funny thing was, this girl, she called me like the next day, and she was like, hey, we'd really like for you to join the team. And I was like, what? Are you serious? Like, after all that, like, there's no way. Like, that interview went so bad. And she was like, she really caught me off guard. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. I would love to hear the feedback from the interviewers, though. And so she was like, you sound like a little surprised. And I was like, yeah, transparently, I didn't think it went that well. That's the only time I ever interviewed and said, oh, I definitely don't think it went well. And she was like, oh, yeah, he actually had really good feedback about you, how you handled yourself. And I was just like, I was like, I'm sorry. I ended up declining the offer. I was like, I don't think I could work in those circumstances. I don't think that's a good way to interview people. And I understand that clients can be difficult and demanding, but maybe you should preface that by doing it. So I would say that was a horrible interviewing experience. I mean, it taught me a lot because I remembered it about professionalism, because now after working with a lot of partners and clients, you do see some people who are just, no matter what you do, they're not happy with kind of, how things go. And you do have to kind of remind yourself to conduct yourself professionally. So yeah, that was mine.
That would be so
I hope those don't exist anymore.
Yeah. That's horrible.
Do they teach you guys about stress interviews in school anymore? Okay.
I
Oh my God, no.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine that. Yeah. Oh my God, no.
I know that in the financial crime investigation world, they do that with you, because you have to learn how to interview other people, so they kind of do put you through a bit of a stress environment. But that's part of the course, right? Because you take the job. It's not just, okay, this is how the interview for general or ABC is going. So, that's terrible. Yeah. Hopefully people are being human out there. So.
Yeah. Oh my God, no. I cannot. I've never heard of anything like that in school, and I cannot imagine that. But yeah, I guess like our next question is kind of like, what's a piece of advice you'd give to someone who's like starting out in your field?
In our field as entrepreneurs.
I guess anyone probably starting out, with their new jobs. I would say one would just be, don't be shy to showcase your strengths and ask for help where needed, and also rely on your network and the people at the job to help you along. Sometimes it's hard when you're in a new environment and you're not really sure, how much of yourself to kind of be. You just have to remember you got hired for a reason. They think you're super qualified, and you should let your light shine as much as you can. Sometimes, like I've been in environments where they'll hire 3 interns at the same time. So you almost feel like you're competing, even though you shouldn't, because of kind of the work that they give you or the way they position things. And so I would say that, like, whatever your unique strength is, there's a reason why they hired you, maybe to complement the team as well. And if it's not a good environment for you, by you kind of being brighter and sharing your views, then you're feeling like it doesn't actually, you're getting penalized for it in some way, or you're getting bad vibes from other people at the company, then that's probably not the best place for you. Which doesn't mean you have to quit right away, but you kind of just have to take each opportunity for its best strengths and keep moving. Like, maybe you pick up a really good skill for talking to people or networking with people or project management. I don't think there's such thing as your dream career. So if you can pick up little things from each step, you'll eventually find, something that has more light for you, that's more of an alignment.
I think that's great advice. Yeah, I think it's about being the bright and shiny you. You're right, Saj. And I think also don't be scared to have good, blissful boundaries in these environments. I think that often when you're in an internship or an articleship or whatever it is, you take on so much as a person, that because you want to prove yourself. But just remember that you're also human, that you're also going through your own experiences, that you have something like work life balance. And I think that being able to absorb as much as you can, for me, that was really one of the best things I learned when I didn't do as many internships, but really when I was in that articleship, sitting next to a manager and seeing how they do something. And the best advice they gave me was, if you can replace this person's role, if you can do what I'm doing now and come with already that packaged, that's how you're going to climb the ladder. And so just spending a lot of time with people, watching how they work, learning how to work faster, not being scared to say, I don't know how to do that. Please, oh, how did you do this quick trick? I think we're all very conscious of the things we don't know. We always feel like we have to know everything. So, best advice is, and Jane said this in one of the very first episodes, but don't be the smartest person in the room. I think keep asking questions. Yeah.
And Jen worked for the DEA for like 20 something years.
Yeah.
Great. And then the next question, in your opinion, what's the most important strength or personality trait someone would need to be successful in your job?
I would say being open. Yeah. Just like being open to criticism, being open to ideas, being open to new ways of doing things. I think that's really helpful in terms of, doing something you've never done before.
Yeah. I think what came to mind for me is resilience, but I think what lies underneath resilience is really an understanding of yourself. It's kind of know thyself, self knowledge. So, and that really goes for everything that you do. But I think when you're kind of taking on a job, a role, internship, anything, yeah, I think being able to push through interesting situations and challenges, you really get to know yourself and being open, like you said, Saj, to actually do that and be okay with learning. So yeah, I think that's the most valuable thing. It really speaks to authenticity in the end.
I guess our next question was kind of like meeting all of these like people who've had successful careers and like fields that you want to go into. You obviously like want to network and learn from them, but how do you do that without making it seem like false or insincere or just awkward?
That's a good question. Yeah, we genuinely care. I think, that's the thing. When we're approaching people to speak on the podcast or to partner with, it's because it's aligned with what we want to do in the world. And, yeah, we want to do cool things in the world. And so as much as it's about building a business, it's really about building a community first and foremost. So because Friday Feels was born out of authenticity and vulnerability, I guess we keep it like that. And yeah, we really do want, it's not money first, it's really human first, I guess. That's how I feel about it. How about you, Saj?
Yeah, so the number one book that's still like the number one book on this is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's super easy to read, but one of his principles is like the most important word to any human is I. They're most concerned with themselves. And so you can, if you understand that, you understand a lot in terms of what is, when you're trying to communicate with them. He gives an example where he goes to a dinner party and this woman is there and he asked her like one question, a few questions about herself, and she goes on and on and on about her plans, about this, about everything else. And at the end, she introduces him to somebody else and says, "Hey, this is Dale. He's actually like so fascinating, and he is such an interesting person and like good friend, like those kind of vibes." Like she just thought the world of him because he actually expressed interest in her. And that's how the human mind kind of works, right, in some aspects. And so I think that, when we were in school, they used to tell us like, oh, try to find something. If you want to reach out to XYZ person, like find an affiliation, find what they like, find what their kids like. Do they like talking about their family? Are they part of this club? Do they like eating avocados? Like I had that on my resume at one time because they asked us to put like personal stuff. Like it's just, and now I see like how it's transcended through time, right? Is I think, Nicole has a good point. If you're being authentic, that's another principle in the book, is that you genuinely have to want to know about the person. And some people, like I've went up to people who are like, had different business models than I did. And I would just be like, how did you do that? Like, what would be your one piece of advice? And sometimes you ask 10 people and 9 people suck. They don't tell you anything good. And one person is just really happy to share their experience because they know what it's like, trying to go through it 10 years ago. So they're just not your people, the other 9. You take what you can from them and then you keep moving. So I think, if you genuinely really want to know, and sometimes you genuinely don't know, right? You can say like, hey, I think I want to do social media, but I really like planning these events. Like, do you know anyone that actually plans events? I've had that happen to me when I was interning at Merrill Lynch. They do like a finance internship and you kind of like help them find more clients. And one of the ladies, she was just like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. Like I've just been in finance so long. I don't know what else I would want to do. And I was like, I really was thinking about like wedding planning and event planning. And she was like, okay, one of my clients, I'm going to make an intro to you. And she made an email intro and I ended up going to visit like a warehouse where it was like this, the guy was an event designer and planner, very famous in New York. And I went to their warehouse. I met with like one of their people that puts on the projects. And it was really cool. She was like, look, if that's really what you think you want. I was like, I think I want to do this. I would love to like talk to somebody in it and do like an informational interview because that was a thing. But people are doing it now. And I've responded to a lot of people who would just come at me like, and say, hey, I'm really interested in this. I saw you did XYZ. Would you be open to chatting for 30 minutes? And it comes out to like really cool, working professional relationships. So if you really genuinely do want to try something out and do care, I would say 1, it's a numbers game. You should reach out to a lot of people because as you know, not everyone's your person. But when you do find those people, they will take you much further in terms of helping you. And that is priceless. One person just giving you the information that you need. So I would say reach out genuinely, but reach out to a lot of people and see what resonates with you.
Yeah. And I'm going to add to that, like, it's exactly what you're saying, Saj. When you're in the present moment with someone in the room, like that person was, giving that undivided, unconditional love, attention, when you're really present, you can also pick up on other things. If you're in sales pitch mode, you're not going to pick up if that person's having a bad day, or maybe you just want to open up a space for them to talk about something. And then that uncovers a whole networking conversation that, wouldn't have existed if you weren't paying attention to the human in front of you. Or even just paying attention to the human inside of you in that moment. Maybe there's something that's on your heart. So I want to say be in the flow as well. Sometimes your intuition will nudge you and say, talk to this person about this. And you're like, oh, this is random, but just do it and see what comes out. And sometimes it just makes for amazing conversations. we've had some really cool conversations like that come out from people we've spoken to, and it was one little mention, and then off it goes into a direction. You never know. So yeah.
Yeah, it's good to hear like from your guys' perspective. That you like want to speak to people and like you guys enjoy it as well. That definitely makes it a little less scary. But yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, people want to, talk about their experiences and hear. It's just, I think one thing is if you're reaching out to a lot of people, be very direct about what you want, and also like being flexible. For example, like if I'm reaching out to someone and I need their help, my calendar is going to be open for them. If they give me I try to say can you give me 2 or 3 slots that work for you? Because it's really annoying when they give you one and you just can't do it. You had a doctor's appointment that you waited, 5 months for, and you're sitting there weighing should I move it or not? So I would say if you want something from someone, make it really easy for them to say yes. So are you available, next week? I'm available anytime, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. I can meet you wherever. I would love to. And genuinely, I used to do that before, and you'd say oh, I'd like to buy you coffee. Most people are not going to take money from a student or someone who just came out of school. Genuine, they used to they'll pay for you. And I've been in situations where I used to only drink lattes, and lattes are way more expensive than coffee. And so I would feel really bad about asking them to pay $6 instead of $2. And so I would either drink the coffee or be no, well, I just want a latte. But I mean, that's all part of being human, right? But I think just showing that effort, that they're not putting their time in vain, they hope it's going to help you at least, then you'll find people who will want to do it. So yeah, you should never feel, embarrassed by asking for expertise, because there are just some things you can't read in a book. You need someone to tell you, which is why I really like that book by Dale Carnegie, because he gives actual examples of things that have worked. And yeah, I would say, yeah, that might be.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I've taken some networking classes in school, and it's just nice to hear the other perspective outside of the classroom space.
Yeah. I took one in a communications class in school, and it was so much more fun than my finance classes. And I was oh my God, this is a whole new world. People care about this stuff. And I think Dale Carnegie taught for 30 years public speaking in New York City. And it's just very interesting, where that journey took him. And I will say, if you do reach out and people don't answer you, there are a lot of books where they have kind of anecdotal evidence. You kind of use those as your mentors if you can't find someone at the job that you're at, or you don't really click with anybody. I would say that's been a safe way for me to kind of grow and learn. When you kind of look around and there is nobody, I've been at jobs where I actually didn't like any of the managers. I could take some advice from them in terms of how they handle certain things, but I didn't feel comfortable asking them, some of these questions. So I think for the last question, are there any questions that you guys would really, you could just throw it out there, that you would really, now that you're going to be within the next 1 to 2 years joining your first corporate gigs, are there pressing questions that you feel your friends or anybody has asked that's people are too scared to ask normally?
From what I've heard, a lot of it has been the networking. How do I meet people, and where do I meet people? And it has been a lot of embarrassment or nervousness just going up and talking to people when you feel you might not have different things to bring to the table. You're just asking from them. So I like the answers to the last question a lot.
Yeah, I think networking is such a big thing. And I feel like the events have changed a lot. It depends on the event, but I know one of the co-working spaces we chatted to, the comment was oh, they're not as fun as they used to be. And I think one thing also kind of on the question you guys asked earlier, if you're at a networking event, just remember you might feel nervous, but everyone else is kind of feeling that too, and we're all such, weird, awkward humans that we're always wondering what we look like and if I spilt on my white pants and, whatever it is. So just relax. And I guess one of the biggest things you can really do is find someone that looks lonely and go talk to them in the room. That helps a lot. That person will really appreciate it as well. So you never know who you might meet. You never know who you might actually interact with in that moment. And it's really the same principles apply when you're kind of going out and by yourself socially outside of the working professional environment, as a human. I don't know if you guys have ever done that exercise where you kind of go out by yourself, go dancing by yourself, go drinking by yourself, go to a bar by yourself. It's good experience because you're putting yourself in situations where, and traveling does that, I found. Why else are you in a place? So find something that works for you. This is going to sound quite strange, but when I started going out by myself, whether that now was socially or whatever, I realized that the smokers are where it's at, they're social. So sometimes I enjoy a cigarette with some wine, and I thought that was a really nice way to break the awkwardness if you're on your own. You don't actually need that, you don't need that kind of vice, but find that's for you, whether that's whatever it might be. Maybe you want to stand and daydream and feel okay with that, and have someone come up to you. So yeah, just remember we're human, and yeah, I guess just enjoy that experience. You never know who you might meet, and the love of your life might be at that networking event. So
Yeah, I would say always also be prepared, and in terms of if you have a business card or you have something to follow up with people. We did so many interviews. There's actually only a handful of people who said thank you for interviewing. Here's my information if anything changes. And it actually, when other people don't do it, it sticks out a lot. I think that's, always do the basics. You should always just be doing the basics, show up professional, clean, tidy, and say please, thank you. Always ask if you can help, be of service to someone else. They mightn't take you up on it, but they appreciate the effort of you actually being mindful that, hey, I do not have that much time. You are asking something of me and you are willing to give something in return. And I think a lot of times, I used to go to a lot of networking events by myself because I don't know, I was curious about something. Nobody else wanted to go and I wanted to see what was going on. And I've actually made lifelong friends from that, going up to speakers. I found my first internship was like that, where I walked up to the CEO. They used to have this thing in school in the entrepreneurship class where they would have CEOs come in, speak about their business, do a panel. And at the end, they'd say, if you have any questions, we encourage you to go up to them and speak to them. It's a hall of 100 kids. How are 100 kids going to go up to one speaker and try to stand out in that presence? And so, you do your research beforehand. You know that they're coming on. You try to act it hey, I would love to chat. Do you have any other opportunities? This is what I'm really good at. I would love to explore this. If there's any way I could just be a fly on the wall. People can feel that excitement and exuberance from you. And it was a lot of follow-up, but I ended up interning there, and that opened the door for so many other places by just being persistent and trying to be as genuine as I could. This is really what I want to learn. I've never heard someone come to our school and talk about their job so excitingly. When I go into finance interviews, no one is they're talking about the 200-year history of Credit Suisse, and it just, wasn't exciting for me. And so for me, that was what I could contribute, is saying oh my God, I'm so excited about what you talked about. And when my first internship was at the Ladders, Marks and Adela run it. And they used to have their monthly check-ins at a movie theater because that's where they could fit 500 people in New York City. And nobody was using the movie theater during the day. And so it was super cool. How many other friends were getting to go to the movies while they're at work? And then they would have popcorn and stuff like that. And you'd sit there and they would give their presentation about the goals and things like that. And so I think if those things get you excited about it, share that. Share what you can share. Just because you don't have experience doesn't mean you don't have value. You just have to figure out how to translate that to somebody who's in a different, position than you. And another thing I'll say is going directly up this holds true in so many other circumstances, but like going directly up to the speakers or the founders or those people tend to be connectors, and they like to see people win. And so there's been many instances where I was like, how did you get into this, like speaking at this engagement? It's like amazing to see a woman doing this at this age and like all kinds of things. And they'd be like, you know what, you should actually talk to XYZ, or like, let's chat later. And that's how you kind of like, build a rapport with someone. So I think those are just some tips for young networking professionals. And also, if you go by yourself, you don't have any dead weight with you. So, like, if you have someone who's super awkward or who can't talk to people, you can kind of move around and do what you need to do. I went to some thinking like, oh, this person is a good clutch to kind of have and intro me to other people. And they got drunk at the event and was like slurring words. And I had to leave early. So I was like, maybe I should have just went by myself.
Yeah, I echo, like going by yourself for things is so much fun, so much fun. You also learn a lot about yourself in the process. So yeah. How about you, Lilah? Is there any other questions that kind of come up and pressing?
I don't think so. I also think the biggest things I've heard from people are just like the networking thing. I guess one other thing I can think of, like, I really like that you said just because you don't have experience doesn't mean you don't have value. I feel like for a lot of us, internships or like our first corporate job are our first jobs in a field. So I guess like how can you highlight like any skills that you may have from like either like working, being part of a club, working in a summer job, something temporary that can like help you kind of stand out or get into a field that you might not have experience in?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that really speaks to how you interview as well. People might not know these things if you don't talk about it. So I think don't be scared to show the full you in that spectrum. We might only ask certain questions in a application process, interview process, and I've often found like if you put those things on your resume, you don't have to just put your qualifications and experience. I know mine has like things I love, the things I like doing extra, so give people a full spectrum of who you are, and also don't be scared to put forward the ideas you have and say like, hey, this is what I thought of for XYZ. I remember when I interviewed at KPMG, I went with like a piece of paper that had lots of very colorful drawings on it, and I had a vision of how consulting and financial crime could work together on certain things and build like a really good corporate culture. And I went into the interview with that, and it was not part of any questions, but I put that in front of the guy, and he was a great leader, a bit of a maverick, and he kind of looked at it and he was like, and he remembered it, but I didn't actually think he paid attention. But I showed him something that, was different to what was the normal interview experience, and a little bit of insight on who I wanted to be, what I wanted to create in the world. So I think don't be scared to show who you are is really what comes for me. Yeah.
I mean, that's a really great answer. I think it's good to be make an impression. Sometimes there's just so many, you're going through so many things, and you have to put yourself in the shoes of the person that's kind of, you're working with or interviewing you. Is how do I, it could be something that you helped your cousin with. It could be something that you visited. You can spin anything as long as you are kind of being genuine about it. So let's say you are doing, business development, but after this you decide, I don't really like this too much. I like more of the advertising. You could highlight the work that you're doing, working with the social media team. You can help with the clubs that you've been talking about. I think you just have to find what that is. I mean, there's been times where I've interviewed for public relations and finance and marketing and like all these different things because I just didn't know. But I tailored it, my experience to each one of those initiatives. And so the other thing, like Nicole said, is like taking what they already have, like coming in and saying like, this is what I see. You never know if that's a new idea for them or it's something they haven't thought about. It's kind of a proactive way for them to see, oh, this person cares. They listened. They can follow directions. They're innovative and creative if that's what the job calls for. So I think that, yeah, you definitely. And another thing is like, if you're interviewing and you can't find an internship, because there's a lot of talent out there that doesn't have a home right now, is make use of that time somehow, whatever it is that you want to do. If it's, well, I put together vision boards and I sent it out to 25 companies. I helped my aunt's, social media page while I was off. I volunteered at the shelter. All of that counts as work experience. And people are looking like, does this person have the translatable skills that I need? So they don't have to have the same job from before. Some industries, they care about that, but can you do the job? And if you can show like, hey, I did it, but I was volunteering, like, well, why can't she do it for my company then? Because she's, she obviously has that skill set.
Yeah, I think that's great. And one last thing, we've seen a few resumes come across our desk now with the application process, and I really want to encourage people out there that, most people are extremely visual interpreters of information. So make your resume feel like you. And this is something artists and creatives really understand. If you have a showcase site or a brand out there in the world, that's your website, your portfolio. You show people, this is who I am, this is what I like, this is what I look like. And I feel like a lot of the resumes, maybe some of them have to be a certain standard format of, the black on white page, one pager. But get into Canva and just design something that feels authentic to you, because one, that will communicate a lot of the skills that you have. Maybe you have graphic design skills that people can only pick up from your resume design, but it will just feel good to you to put that out in the world. And that might be a great platform for you to showcase what we call in the creative world really your digital press kit, your digital like resume. Think of it like that, don't be shy to use color. We don't live in black and white always. So.
And the last thing I would say, which I wanted to mention earlier, is we all know how to use the AI tools. So do not solely be relying on ChatGPT to answer questions. Because when we download and we compare against everybody else, if you have the same suggestions, we know what you used. I don't know if your teachers tell you this in school, but like, they must have it really bad, because just from the submissions that we've gotten, I was like, how did all these people come up with the same partnerships? I think, again, it's to know your audience. Sometimes you're just mass applying just to see what hits. But when you do, something that we did when we were hiring for this role is we said like, hey, we are founders. We are a small team. We are personally like reviewing these, because I could see the submissions that were coming in. And yeah, we probably could create really good content with just using AI. And I think people are still learning how to use it alongside their own creativity. So I do think that, but you have to kind of push yourself back in there, like your own personal ideas, because otherwise we could hire 6 other people that can just use the AI tools. And I think that's going to be more and more important for people of your generation moving into the working world, because there are so many tools and jobs that are getting eliminated or need to be interpreted by AI in order for you to succeed. For example, we have a AI tool that does meeting notes. And so it captures fireflies and otter. They'll capture everything you talked about. And then it'll say like, it auto assumes like the next steps, the action items, the questions that were asked. And sometimes when you get it back, it actually wasn't really what the main point of the meeting was. And so, for example, last week, we had a conversation at Sapphire Growth Partners, and Ruki uses Otter and Fireflies. And I was like, oh, which one of these do you think is good for us to implement now that we're having like more meetings? And she was like, well, the other day when you were talking about like, I was talking about a personal incident and how we like one of the family members got into a car accident. We had to call, like, find a lawyer and like all this other stuff. That's the action items it took. It was only 5 minutes of the conversation. The rest of the conversation was like 45 minutes about the business, and like we were just chatting. And so it didn't have a filter for like, personal stuff or just fluff or like informal conversation. And that's where people come in. And so I think you have to know how to learn how to utilize AI. That makes sense. But for instance, it auto sends out the meeting notes to everybody, no matter what. So, like, if I'm relying on that to take all my meeting notes, now when I think about, okay, what were the action items for that? I can't actually use anything from there. I'm literally going back in the transcript. It's like I should have just took the notes while it was on the phone. So I think you have to keep that in mind for young professionals, is that if you're using the AI, everyone else is. There's been instances where I've literally copy and pasted and been like, did you write this, Chat GPT? And it'll be like, yes, I did. So you kind of have to, utilize what your own personality is and then leverage that with AI. I would say becomes very powerful, because now you could do 10 things in the same time that it was going to take you.
Yeah, ChatGPT definitely has a certain voice, a certain way of writing something. And I think it's really quite awesome that ChatGPT knows its own voice, its own way and style of writing, because it does. We see that too, So I think that's great advice, Saj. Yeah.
Well, I think that kind of wraps us up. It's been like so much fun chatting with you guys. Yeah. Thanks for contributing your questions and then for helping us with this conversation. Hopefully it's been super insightful for you guys as well as our listeners. And, in terms of our final thoughts, what were your answers to these top 10 questions? Feel free to engage with us on our socials out there. Let us know your thoughts, feels, and stories, especially the stories. We love them. We talk about them all the time on here, but we love hearing from you guys and then sharing them. And remember to tag us using hashtag #TheseFridayFeels. And Nicole, you want to take us into next week and what's in store?
For those who have forgotten, Sunday is Father's Day, so get those gifts sorted if you haven't already. We are doing a very special Dear to Our Hearts conversation episode next week. We're taking a little peek into our inner circle, but we're really excited for this episode. Another top 10, and it should be really interesting. But until next time, that is our mix for today. We have had so much fun mingling with you, and we wish you safe travels into your bed, into the night, and into this awesome weekend. So see you next week, and keep it real.